Hi everyone, and welcome back to the M.A.N.Culture podcast, a very Halloween edition of the M.A.N.Culture podcast. You may have observed that we don't have Cadis with us today. Unfortunately, Cadis had to bail on us this morning, so we had the conversation about, should we postpone and re-record at some other point, but we thought it was important because the rest of us could all get in the room. That we should go ahead as is. So today I'm lucky enough to be joined by one of the founding members of M.A.N.Culture, Andy. So welcome to the podcast. Thanks very much for stepping in. I know it was like you got into the room and you're like, right, you'll be doing this instead. You're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So thanks very much for stepping up. Just to get you up to speed, I know you've watched some of the podcasts, but just to get you up to speed and remind you of what we're talking about. So it's like meeting men and boys where they gather to discuss masculinity. And its role in male violence, maybe, but just discussing all things sort of masculine. What to expect from the podcast? The rules that we come up with in podcast one will be sort of reinforcing them. So radical honesty. If you feel like saying it, just say it, and we can deconstruct it because it's about conversations. Curiosity. So if we don't understand, we'll sort of like explore down rabbit holes of stuff. Vulnerability, but only as much as you're comfortable with. So if you don't want to talk about something, so like Scott, let's just move on from that. You can wink at me or something like that, and we can move on. And the respectful challenge, the lights are back. So we've got the lights back. So if we say something that we are not sure about its origin, or if we say something that we might do in typical masculine circles, like, maybe that's not something we should approach, or we just sort of want to understand, we'll hit the lights. The sound magician, I nearly said sound guy. The sound magician will put in the necessary sound effects and we'll discuss and deconstruct what we're talking about. Okay, happy?
Yep. Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, so the first thing is a check-in. So it's sort of around about 15 minutes in total, so we're just going to have a check-in and see how you are. I really feel as if I'm putting you in the spot by saying, how are you? So I feel as if it should maybe be the other way around to set you in gently. Are you happy to do that?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay.
How are you, Scott?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Yeah, really good. I feel as if I always have to quantify really good, not quantify. I always feel sorry for being really good because I am always generally really good. But yeah, I'm doing a couple of courses through work that's really opened my eyes to stuff that I kind of thought I'd done it, or I thought I'd sorted it and parked it, but maybe not as much to the extent of maybe I just wasn't as well as I kind of thought I was. I think I maybe sort of brushed a few things under the carpet, or put them in a cupboard and just put a box on them. And there's nothing major. It's nothing like, I've got no skeletons apart from this one. This guy here. However, yesterday really sort of hit home for me. It was really nice. So Saturday I went for a swim and it wasn't great because the weather wasn't brilliant, but yesterday morning it was beautiful. And then we met up with you guys to have a coffee and a catch up, and that felt good to get everybody in the room. Yeah. And then I got home and my wife said, let's go to the beach. So I got in the water again, so it was great. It was just like the perfect storm of sort of like, it was a really good day. The kids are off school at the moment, so I had to sneak out the house this morning.
A few extra challenges.
Yeah, it's nice. Like the dog's like doing the usual stuff. I'm like, shut up, you idiot. But yeah, I'm really, really good. Yeah. How about you, Andy? How are you?
Yeah, well, we've obviously had a little catch up this morning, but I think feels weird being on this side of a podcast rather than just sitting there listening to it, because you know what I'm like. I'm a bit of a guru when it comes to podcasts, and quite often send you the links on the WhatsApp to say, check this one out, it's really, really interesting. To be sat this side of the cameras is really interesting. But I had a really good day yesterday, and I say we had the catch up in the morning, which was awesome. And then I've done something yesterday which I've been holding off on for probably 2 years since I went through some therapy, and connected with my dad yesterday. Okay. So arranged to go up to Exeter Chiefs. I'm a big rugby fan, and arranged it with just me and my dad, and managed to get into talk about vulnerability, go into breaching the doors on that one, to speak to my dad around some of the things that came out through therapy around my childhood, which were all really, really positive memories. But just getting to that point where sitting at the age of 44 and realizing I don't really know who my parents are, as in, I don't know what their past was, so what was their upbringing. So we had a bit of a conversation in the car, and I kind of spoke to him about that and had some ideas as to how I wanted to do that. So I found these books online. It's Dad, What's Your Story? I Want to Hear Your Story. So it kind of guides them through their childhood, but also looks at things that I've done that make them proud and what's their fondest memory of me growing up and all that sort of stuff. Because you just got to that point where you're thinking, like, you know, life goes on, doesn't it? And you start seeing your parents age, and do want to lose the opportunity to actually have that conversation and actually hear about what his childhood was like, because no doubt it was extremely different to mine. So we had that conversation, and what was really interesting was my dad's a little bit like me, really. He's very quiet, just doesn't really kind of push himself to the forefront. And the floodgates opened, and he talked for about an hour and a half, non-stop, about growing up in Pembroke Street in Devonport and moving to Manadon, and then talked about, you know, the stuff that he did at school, which he was really, really passionate about. Talked about my grandparents, and he's gone through our family trees. He's gone back quite far on it to see where my family have come from, and it was just a really good day. Watched the rugby. Chiefs didn't win, unfortunately, but yeah, came back with a real sense of achievement yesterday.
Okay.
And it was just really nice listening to my dad just speak. You know, he just literally did not stop speaking for like a good couple of hours. But just learning those things around his passions growing up in school around art and history, which I never knew. You know, the opportunities he had, which he couldn't have. He talked about some of the things he regretted growing up, some of the decisions he made or was forced to make, maybe is a better way of putting it. But it was a real connection, and I think he really kind of felt that as well, just that connection.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, the plan B moving forward is to get my mum and dad these books, because you know, time is of the essence, really, in you know, not just being able to sit down and talk to them, but also having that time, being able to reflect on them, those books moving down the future, and just listen to what they went through. I know my mum moved around quite a lot as a youngster, with my granddad being in the Navy. But just hearing that story, and also just be nice to hear those things that maybe they remember of me growing up, and obviously my brothers and sisters as well, that they remember that maybe I don't even think about. Is there something that I did where, you know, that they were proud of, or that you know, is a particularly special memory for them. So yeah, it was a good day yesterday, and caught up with you boys in the morning, and then said I had the afternoon to myself and my dad, and like I say, it's just really interesting putting that conversation off. And we talk about conversations, but, you know, just feeling like, is this something my dad's going to want to talk about? But just taking that opportunity to just dip my toe in and see if he was interested, and what a result. It was, real eye opener yesterday.
Yeah, okay.
So, and it was special for me as well. It was really special for me to you know, hear my dad talk about his past and bring up stuff that I had no idea about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it was, it was good. So it's that, and then obviously work's always busy, as it always is, but sort of working on some bits at the moment, which hopefully have a good impact in work. And then, as you boys know, there's always a project on at home as well, which I'm pushing on with, which takes up a lot of time and money at the moment, unfortunately. But so that's all good as well.
Okay, cool. It's funny, as you were talking about that, I remember a conversation that we realised with my partner's mother was starting to look quite frail and infirm, and then he would start a conversation about the family, and she would have all these dates and all these sort of thing, and you're like, that's going to be gone eventually. That information is actually going to go with them. Yeah. So if we don't find out about it, I mean, you talked about family trees, and to a certain extent, I quite like a good family tree, but to a certain extent, all it is names and dates. It's actually what are the stories behind those eyes, sort of thing. And you see some of the pictures. The one that springs to mind for me is my grandfather, who I never met, because he didn't even, did he see his, I'm not even sure if he saw his son married, so my father married. Yeah. But just that, when you see that face, it's like, who is that person behind those eyes that I have never met, will never meet? So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think the thing is, well, when you look at it, it's only a few steps of generations which take you back to a time which is completely different to the world we live in now. So I was chatting to my dad yesterday, and my great-granddad, born in 1888, and it was just like, what would the world have been like back then, and he was in the Navy. So what was the Navy like in 1888, what was that?
Big.
Yeah, well, yeah, bigger than it is now, but what was that life like? And, even speaking to my dad, talking about growing up, in the 50s, as a young child, living in a flat in Devonport, and he said, he had a good childhood, but it was tough. It was a tough time.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to kind of link back to that. And I know I've spoken to you about it, but a lot of this has come through reading books, the Seven Sisters series I'm reading, and that's also about the family history and how, the journey that the grandparents have taken and the child they had and where that came in. And it all starts to link back in together again. And I think that's kind of one of the pushes I had to push me over the edge to have that conversation with my dad was, where have you come from, and what's influenced you in your life, and where did your parents come from? What was their experiences? And all then leads down to where I am today, and whatever that future then holds as well. So yeah, it's just really interesting conversations yesterday. We like an interesting conversation, don't we?
Yeah, we do. And thanks very much for that, because it's important to acknowledge that the reason we do this check-in is because traditionally men would just be like, I'm all right, you're all right, sort of thing. It's just seeing behind those eyes.
Did you watch the football yesterday?
Yeah. That's about it. No, wrong-shaped ball.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. So it's just about having those conversations. And thanks very much for being so vulnerable. And I did, as we talked on the way down, you were telling me about it, and I'm like, I hope you bring it up during the podcast.
I can see the light bulb coming on for you. Yeah. Straight away, I could already feel it. So yeah.
Right, brilliant. So after the break, we will be delving a little bit deeper into this man's psyche. Don't worry, don't panic. It's just finding out a little bit more about Andy Hodges. See you after the break.
So the part of the work we do as M.A.N.Culture is we come into local businesses and organisations, sports clubs, and we do workshops which range from a different amount of time, where we try and start a conversation around these issues that we're going to be talking about today. So if you wish to book us and get some information around how we can come into your organisations, please check out the website below or drop us a line at info@manculture.co.uk.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the next part of our Halloween podcast. And as said before the break, I just wanted to find out a little bit more about you, Andy. And it's funny actually, because I had some very clear questions I wanted to ask Cadis, but I feel a little bit different to you. So what I want to do by starting off is sort of tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so Andy Hodges, as you said, born and raised in Plymouth. Most of my family, all my family still live here, and as we just mentioned then, a lot of my ancestors also are Plymouth. So it's very, very close to me, the city anyway. So I've moved and lived around with my work and stuff. So I've lived around Devon and Cornwall a lot. I've always come back home, and it does feel like home. Plymouth is home to me. So yeah. So what about me? What do you want to know? Rugby's my passion.
Okay.
I was brought up as a youngster, really, really fortunate. We had horses and rode a lot. So from the age of 4, we rode horses and did that at shows and competitions and stuff. But also then played a lot of American football. So my brothers played American football.
American football?
American football. So this was way, way back in, God, it must have been in the 80s. Plymouth Admirals was really, really just starting to form then, and it was just starting to creep across the pond from America. So my brothers had them. My brothers are older than me, so I always remember being a young tacker, probably about 8 years old, and trying to play American football with 12, 13-year-olds. I just loved that tackling, loved that physicality of it.
Yeah.
So Mum always talks about I'd be down there and trying to get involved, but I wasn't old enough, and that really frustrated me. So I went to secondary school locally at Devonport High School, and straight away I knew rugby. I wanted to play rugby. And that just became my passion really, all through growing up. In fact, funnily enough, chatting to my dad yesterday about it, saved my life. Rugby saved my life.
Okay.
So when I was 13, I had meningitis.
Yeah.
Should have died probably.
Okay.
And that again links back to why I had the therapy a couple of years ago. But the only reason I survived, so I had meningitis and septicemia, wasn't expected to survive the night, managed to come out, get through it. And the only thing the doctor said, the reason why I managed to come through it was my level of fitness at the time.
Yeah. Okay.
And that was because of my passion for rugby. I was playing or training 7 days a week. So whilst my mum's washing bill was probably a massive bill with water, because I was every day coming home covered in mud, but that made me survive probably one of the biggest points in my life, really. Always hark back to meningitis. But yeah, so rugby, and then joined my job when I was 20, and that's where I've been for the last 24 years. Did a bit of bartending before that. I was down in Heroes, cocktail barman. One thing most people don't know about me.
Okay.
So saw myself as a bit of a Tom Cruise
No, we
at
heard it
points.
first.
So yeah, saw myself as a bit of a Tom Cruise at one point in my life. But yeah, then joined the job, and that's my career. That's where I've been.
I want to delve into that physicality sort of thing, and the reason I want to delve into it is because I'm just like, I would rather eat my own feet than do something like that. So, and I think it hints a little bit at obviously seeing the bigger kids sort of, and you wanting to play with them sort of thing. Did it come from that, or did it come from somewhere else? Do you just enjoy when you talk about the physicality? It's like,
yeah, I think growing up it was always something there around that. So we were always very sporty. So it was horse riding, or it was American football, or it was kicking a football around down the park, because we lived in Peveril, so we had Central Park on our doorstep, and obviously Home Park just down the road from us. I think it's also being the third brother out of three. So there's 6-ish years between me and my oldest brother, and there's 4 years between my next brother. So they were quite close in age, and then I came along a few years later. So it's always rough and tumble. And I was always like the little stunt man growing up. So anything to like be part of the clique with my brothers.
So what we're going to do is we're going to shoot you out of this. And you're like, as long as you're doing it.
We had my brother's 50th celebration, 50th birthday celebration recently, and we were sort of reminiscing over the things we did. And I mean, it was, looking back, it's like, how did we survive? And how did the house survive when we're sort of setting fire to Star Wars toys and things like that? And it was just the most bonkers stuff we used to do. But they would just dare me to do stuff, and it'd be like, do that, and it'd be really funny. And I'd just throw myself off walls and downstairs and all sorts. So but yeah, it's always been quite physical, always been quite active as kids. And I think there's just that element of that which I just grew up with. But I think there's also that point when you look at rugby teams, that was my group, it's your team, you know, it's like that camaraderie, which is, I think, just grown up through it, and sort of setting into secondary school, having never really played rugby and just picking it up really, really quickly, but just loving that running around, loving the running with the ball, loving, you know, the scoring the tries and seeing that team win, but, you know, putting those big tackles in and things was just like, I love that. And then, you know, a few injuries, and still feeling those injuries today at the age of 44. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, I think it was just growing up with a fair bit of rough and tumble, and that physicality with my older brothers, and trying to be, you know, up with them as they're going through puberty, and I'm still trying to catch up with them, but still trying to like run around with them and all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's just, I mean, you know, it's just using my older brothers as tackle shields. You know, I started playing rugby at 11. I'm getting my sort of 14, 15-year-old brother, so just run at me, I'm going to tackle you, and just keep doing it until I could do it. So I can tackle you at 15, I can tackle the other players my age. But yeah, no, I've just grown up everywhere I've lived. I've always played rugby, played it to a good level, and it was just, it's just one of those things in life, I think, where that's where I feel probably my most confident in life, is when I'm stood on a rugby pitch. And
see, that is interesting, isn't it? Just saying that, it takes the penny home to bring it back to masculinity and stuff like that. A lot of it is about confidence, isn't it? A lot of it is like, if I get involved, I feel as if I need to kind of know what I'm talking about, but there has to come a time, what is your point of entry if you don't know anything about it, sort of thing. And it sort of leads me on to this getting involved with M.A.N.Culture, and, well, actually not getting involved, founding M.A.N.Culture, and sort of...
Founding,
Well, you were, it's fair to say you're a founding member. So how did you get involved with that? Why did you get involved with that? Why is it important to you? And I know that's three questions, a great big huge question, but just do your best with it.
So where do we start from? So at the time I was working in domestic abuse. So I was leading teams on domestic abuse, and I was involved in lots of conversations in the city. So you've got a big partnership working in the city domestic abuse, sexual violence, and they all work together in partnerships. You know, council and Trevi and other people who are all involved in those conversations. And it was an interesting time for me to step into that space. It was something I wasn't particularly knowledgeable about at the time, but it quite quickly became a passion of mine. Okay. When you started hearing the stories and when you started listening to the experiences of people who were victims of domestic abuse and then looking at the circumstances around it all, it became this massive passion for me. And you know, I just went off and then started reading books about it and listening to podcasts about it. And you know, stepping into that as a relative novice, really, not really knowing much about it, but then becoming, I wouldn't say an expert, but just becoming more knowledgeable about it. Yeah. So it was a tail end of, I think it was 2021. We had the incident at Keam in Plymouth. So Plymouth got hit by two really traumatic incidents in the city in close succession. So Keam and then Bobby Ann's murder. And in the domestic abuse, sexual violence arenas, there was a lot of conversations were starting around violence against women and girls. It was starting to become a national topic as well. But I think it became a particular topic for Plymouth because we had gone through that as a city, and those conversations were having around. So what the hell is going on here? Like, how is this happening? Why is it happening in our city? And I was at the point then leading domestic abuse in the city for a certain area of business. I was the only man having those conversations. So I was a man sat in a partnership of all women, apart from myself. And the conversation turned around, and you know, this is where I kind of tip my hat really to the likes of Hannah and Laura and that who were involved in those conversations. But we started talking about they were saying we need to listen to the women and girls of the city, find out why they're not feeling safe, what is it about violence against women and girls that's important to them, and we need to get their opinions on that and we need to work with that. So I took a deep breath, put my hand up on the team's call, and they came across to me and I said, if we're going to have an impact on this situation, we can't forget the men and boys because we're integral to being a solution to what we're facing. And that was really where that kind of pebble was thrown into the lake really, and the ripple started going. And thankfully to them, they were all like, do you know, that's a really, really good idea. And I was quite happy to lead on that because it felt like I should be doing that. It felt quite important to me as a man that I need to step into this sphere because it's a conversation that I wasn't really part of until that point really, until I started getting into domestic abuse. I just wasn't part of that conversation. I did my day job and that's what we had to do. So from there, obviously, Laura Griffiths, who was working for the council at the time, she connected me with Matt and then you. And then we then got together as a three, really, with where it came from. So it's a really interesting point in time that, you know, again, you talk about vulnerability. I could have sat on that Teams call and not said anything. I felt, because it did feel quite difficult as a man to raise my voice in that and go, hang on, what about this as an idea? But thankfully I did because it was really greeted well. It was seen as a positive step forward and possibly something that wasn't necessarily thought about. The focus was definitely on the views and opinions of the women and girls in the city rather than bringing in the other half of this and saying, well, let's talk to men and boys as well because we're really important. We need to get involved in that. So as you know, we got together, we sent letters out to businesses and organisations, to the universities, and then we got the 12 volunteers that met up at Argyle very early 2022. We sat down with Ben Hurst, Beyond Equality, and had that moment of 12 strangers who came together and, as I said at the conference last year, became brothers really, and that's where we kind of came together.
It's funny actually, because some of the standout parts of that answer is, I think I'll park the deep breath bit because it will come back into that, but you leading on that, but it's a really important point, isn't it, that the people that are talking about violence against women and girls are women and girls, and actually men don't get involved in the conversation. And the reason we don't get involved in the conversation is because we think it's nothing to do with us unless we're perpetrators. But actually it doesn't take that far to delve down into, okay, so what is it in my behaviour? And I will own this, you know, in the past I have probably displayed and exhibited some suspect behaviour, but I just didn't know it was a problem. And it's not until the 12 of us got together in that room and they said, oh, how do you feel about walking through the park in the evening? Yeah, I'm fine with that. No problem at all. How does your partner feel? Don't know. Go home and ask them.
Yeah.
And then we come in day 2 and we're like, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
There's something here, isn't it?
I didn't realise it was to this extent, because women's experiences, every day I'll think about this. So I might think there might be a case where I'll think about, am I safe here? Whereas actually women will probably think about a lot more. It's just part of their daily sort of life.
Yeah. It's the impact that has everyday life, isn't it? It's just like you said, the things we don't have to think about, I guess. It becomes
normalised, isn't it?
Yeah,
it becomes normalised.
And I think that's where that really important part of it is and it is about getting balance. And I think we certainly spoke about really early on when we sort of came together as a group, that you've got these extreme views sat on either side of this subject, haven't you? So that the echo chambers that happen, and you've got the men's rights activists on one side, you've got probably the far feminist kind of views on this side, but actually there's a big majority of people sat in the middle who are like, I don't really have those strong opinions as strong as that, but I have opinions, I have a voice. And it's kind of like just bringing that back almost into the centre and going, so what does this look like? So you said then about, perpetrator behaviours and things like that, but and I think one of the biggest kickbacks I think we get when we start conversations around is, but it's not all men, it's, you're not, and that's right. We certainly say, it's maybe not all men are perpetrators, but all men can be part of that solution. And it's not until you have those conversations and you step out of that world of masculinity that we've grown up in and almost blind to, I think, because until you start unpacking it a little bit, there's things that have come up in those conversations we had at Argyle, 2 years ago when we all got together, and conversations we've had post that, and some of the conversations we've had with the M.A.N.Culture conversations we've had, where suddenly you start unpicking it and going, I never thought of that. I never even thought how that could impact on somebody else's life, or it was never even in my conscious thoughts that was a reality for somebody, because I walk around in my world that I'm used to, just carry on walking down and not really being aware of it. And that's really the important part of what we're trying to do, is when you talk about having those conversations, is to try and unpack that for other people in the same way that we walked into that room, not really understanding what it was that necessarily was the issue. And then suddenly having those light bulb moments when you have those conversations with partners or female friends, etc. And I think as we have more of those conversations, more things come out, and you're thinking, do you know what? I never thought of that. Never thought that could be a problem. I never thought that would impact on somebody. And that's a reality of it, I think. And that's, I think, where certainly we as a group over the last 2 years have grown, because we came in, we're not academics, we're not experts in our field, just being a group of normal blokes who've got together and gone, what's this all about then? Because it's a very complex situation.
Two things that jump out there is the thing about men don't get involved in the conversation. So, and it links a little bit to you, like being, taking a deep breath and raising your hand about it. We don't get involved unless we feel as if it's something to do with us, and we probably didn't traditionally. And also just not having the expertise and not wanting to get involved because we don't sort of know what it's about. And I think that's a real, it's a real masculine trait. That is, if I really reflect on it, and I probably wouldn't have done before, as you said, I always am reminded of your joke that you used in the conference last year about the two fish. The two fish walking along, and the big fish comes along and said, how's the water, lads? And they look at each other and go, what's water? Because we just don't realise the issues, but we don't look at it. And I do remember some of those moments with, talking to people about it.
And I think that was the point really on that Teams call in the tail end of 2021, and it did feel quite alien to be like, this isn't for me to get involved. This isn't my problem. So shut up. just shut up, Andy. This isn't your fight.
Yeah.
This is for women to be talking about. And it was also linking in, there's a TV program on BBC, I think it's BBC iPlayer or something, and it was talking about, it went into schools and started talking to boys and girls. So they separate the boys and girls to talk about rape culture and sexual harassment in schools and stuff. And that was kind of another element to it where it kind of reinforced that thinking of whether she went and spoke to the girls and they were very open about their experiences. And the boys didn't even turn up to the room. It was like, we'll meet you at 1 o'clock in the classroom, we'll talk about it. And the boys were like, I'm not even going to that.
Yeah.
Because there's an element of fear. There's an element of reflection, like you said then, about your past. And I think everyone could probably put their finger on a point in time where they've gone, could have done that better. But it was also that element of those boys just not wanting to talk, not wanting to go into that space for a whole host of reasons. And that's why I think we all as a group think it's really important that we do need to, because I think some of the comments we made early on was about, men just sat in the shadows because they're like, this ain't my fight. So I don't need to get involved in this. You go for it, girls and women. You go and do your thing and good luck to you. But actually we kind of need to raise our voices because again, it comes back to this. It's not all men, but we can be part of that. We can actually champion for women's safety. We can change that cultural sort of visions that we have to just make those 1% improvements on it. And
as you said, it's not just about, when we started delving down into, what is masculinity? How is it helping and hindering us, sort of thing? We could easily have been steered into directions regarding mental health, etc. And we did have to make a conscious move of, hang on a minute, there's organising, and we're not saying that it's not important, but there's organisations that are dealing with it. But if you look around, there isn't many organisations engaging men and boys in the conversation about, male violence. And it doesn't even have to be violence against women and girls if you don't want it to be. It's just violence. Why is it if you and I don't agree with something, we can't just go, all right, okay, let's not agree, and that's fine. It very quickly becomes egoic, almost like, well, I'm right because it's my opinion, sort of thing.
Yeah, but I think the two issues go hand in hand. Certainly, I look back with the last sort of 12, 18 months for me. So starting this journey from the early 2022, and then that journey for me has, for me personally anyway, widened a little bit further to go, but what about that over there? What about those issues? Certainly, Richard Reeves' book and listen to George of the Tin Men, it challenges you. It really challenges your thinking when you start thinking about what's going on with men as well, what's going on with men and boys and the challenges they're facing, the influences that are online, where's that gap being filled, or how's that gap being filled when boys are looking at where's my masculine or where's my male role models in life, and you've got this massive void sat there. But then also looking at the challenges that they're facing, how do those challenges link with the challenges that women and girls are facing, and where's that bridge, where's that meeting point with those two issues? And I think there are elements within those which you almost look at the cause and effect of, they have a knock-on effect for all of them. But
absolutely.
But for me, it is about balance, and it's about bringing those conversations together and enabling people to explore. This is the world I live in. This is how I see it, but this is how women and girls experience the world as well. And just being able to have those conversations without finger pointing, without blaming, and just so we can understand and then reflect on that a little bit more ourselves.
Okay. Yeah. You've almost built the bridge for me there to the final question, and I was hesitating to ask it, but you've brought it up there, so I feel as if like that's a sign he wants me to ask this. So you talked about role models and stuff like that. Who would you consider as like a massive role model in your life? Or a hero?
A difficult conversation. So my personal hero, going back to the rugby, is Johnny Wilkinson. Always been someone, I think the way he presents himself now, I mean, he's been on a massive journey himself post his rugby career, but even the way he played, that fairness, but really putting 110% into everything he did. He came across as a great leader. He stood up in the 2003 World Cup and took that drop goal. But he just came across as one of these people who was just a real steady, but also really focused person. And when you sort of read a bit more about him, the mental health struggles he had around sort of the OCD, etc. And he's then, you look at his journey moving on, he's become very spiritual, very much about some of this stuff, really looking at the way we live our lives and the way that, things that we've talked about before, about nutrition and exercise and mental health, has a real impact on us. So he's my rugby hero. Other role models, I'll be honest, I really struggle. Okay. I think you're going to throw the standard answer out there and go with my dad. And I think my dad has been a big role model for me. I've always called him my rock. He's always been the person who's, if there's issues in life, he's the one I'll go to for advice. Okay. Because he very much is a considered talker. Yeah. So he won't just come back with an answer. He'll sit there, it's interesting, okay. And then explore it a little bit more and then give you an answer which is generally right on the button, which is always quite interesting for me. I've had a few role models in work, I could think, where I look up to and go, that's the sort of person I'd like to be. But I do think it's a really interesting question. When you look in the world now, when you look at male role models, who is there? You go beyond the sports stars and those people, which are a little bit maybe superficial. Where are they? What do they look like? I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve, but I can definitely tell you who aren't the role models, and we're not going to go down that road necessarily right now, because I think
please don't mention any names.
It's going to be quite obvious who we're talking about. But I think when you look at that void currently sat of role models, what does that actually mean? What does it look like? Yeah. And I think quite easily we're seeing, certainly through the conversations we have and the things you can see and hear on the internet, there are certain people who are stepping into that space, which unfortunately have a very biased view. Yeah. And again, you look at the motivations. What's the motivation around the work they do? It's a lot of it's money, status, unfortunately. Okay.
Thanks very much, especially for confirming that I had to ask that last question. Okay. So after the break, we are going to be investigating a little bit more about what M.A.N.Culture does and the direction we're hoping to go in. Thanks very much. You may be aware that M.A.N.Culture are a community interest company, and everyone that gets involved is just doing it through their own time. If you feel as if you could support us, please donate via the QR code. Any amount helps. Even just the price of a cup of coffee would really help us push the message forward. Thanks very much. So before the break, we talked about we talked about how you get involved in M.A.N.Culture and stuff like that. And what we're going to do in this part is, first of all, talk a little bit about the direction we're looking to sort of go in, and maybe some reasoning behind that. And also, we've got some questions from you, the viewer stroke reader. So we're going to answer some of them as well. Okay? Yep. And we'll just divvy them up as you feel. If you feel strongly about answering it, we'll
just pass it across to you.
Well, as long as you expect a long and rambling answer, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so as we said, M.A.N.Culture, setting it up and sort of looking at it, and I suppose it seems like a perfect point here, which is after our second conference. Which was back in September. And I think, to use your analogy of like put your foot in the ball sort of thing and just have a bit of a pause and look at the directions we're sort of moving in. What's that kind of looking like for you, sort of thing? You've talked a little bit about, this is interesting and that is interesting. So, expand a little bit about that. What's the kind of things you're looking at and finding interesting?
I think it's getting out there. So it's about, how do we promote ourselves? How do we open the doors for people to come through, isn't it? I mean, so it's I think probably for me, looking back, the last sort of 18 months, we've been waiting for people to come to us. Yeah. So as much as we've put some things out there, maybe we haven't put enough stuff out there. I think the conferences were a really good point to raise the profile of what we're trying to do. But I think, as we also discussed, a lot of the people who came to our conference are kind of our early adopters. They get it. They're already there, and they're like, yeah, we get it. And they're almost our champions, really, saying, go for it, boys. Let's get this going. I think for me, the challenge over the next sort of 12 months, 2 years, is to probably be a little bit more, use the word aggressive, but is to go out and start getting hold of the people we need to have those conversations with, i.e. men and boys, and just start to forge those links to say, look, let's just have that conversation, which is why, we've very much built we've built the work that we do on workshops.
Yeah.
Because I think we made it quite clear right from the start that we're not here to teach people how to behave. That's not what this is about.
There's a question of that.
And that's
so,
certainly not,
skirt around that.
that's certainly not where we're going with it. But let's just start developing those conversations. Let's just start putting some thoughts out there and seeing if people are getting it or not. Explore it. But explore it in quite a fun way. Like this can't be it's a serious topic, but I feel that we can't necessarily come at it from a really serious viewpoint necessarily. If that makes sense. It's like let's have fun with it and let's appreciate everything that's going on.
Do you remember we went up to Bristol? There was a conference which was Boys at the Crossroads conference, and there was someone that presented there or had talked about this part specifically. It's almost as soon as we start talking about men and women's issues or masculinity, femininity, feminism, very quickly we pick sides. Very quickly the battle lines are drawn and it becomes a war. And as you said earlier on, we've been successful through thousands of years of evolution because we all work together, sort of thing. So it's almost as if we should be able to be playful about it. And while if you also mentioned your physique, so you are very strong physique, and the way you come across is very calm and very measured. And some of the stuff we talk about like off the camera, we do talk off camera. Some of the stuff we talk about, it's very, stoicism comes into it, so stoic and sort of very reserved and I feel as if someone said, like, how do you feel about that? And I'm like, I don't feel anything because I don't know how to feel, sort of thing. It's almost as if you're just exploring that for the first time. So it's kind of got to be playful about it, hasn't it?
I think you have to. Else it just, it turns people off the conversation. Is the first point of it, but by having that fun, I think you then start to smudge those battle lines a little bit.
Yeah,
you start
exactly,
to just sort of like arrange the line in the sand and go, let's have some fun with it. And that sounds like a really odd thing to say when you talk about such a serious topic. But when we're talking about some of the basic traits that we hold in our minds around femininity and masculinity, and almost turning them on the heads a little bit and just having a playful conversation about it. But this isn't about having a war. This isn't about having a fight. This is about, it's about forging a link, isn't it? It's about forming a bond between the two of you and going, there are differences, but are they that big?
Joining dots as well. So as you said, forging a link, that's joining dots between those two things. So, do people feel safe doing this? Yes, no, discuss, etc. But have you thought about why they don't feel safe in doing that? And the thing that jumped at me there, we talk about masculinity and femininity. So yesterday there was a film on television, my wife and I, so if we're cooking, my wife will put the TV on and I'm like, don't put the TV on, because now I'm cutting and trying to listen to that at the same time, because I do try to do both things at once, neither successfully. But it was, there was a film on that I find particularly, and I'm not going to say triggering, I find it emotional. And I just can't watch it. I was like, you cannot put that film on because I just find it so... I'm trying to think of a way to put it, but it's just so emotional that, and I quite like it. I know they're not called chick flicks anymore, so like alarm bells. It's the romantic comedy sort of thing. I quite enjoy the romantic comedies, but
so what was the film?
Well, if you want to sponsor this episode, it's Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again.
Oh, okay. My mum was watching that when I dropped my dad home last night.
Yeah, so if you watch the last, the bit towards the end when she's christening her child and the mother's, I can feel it now in the back, the hairs in the back of my neck are standing up. The mother's not there because she's died of breast cancer. So, if you haven't watched the film yet, I'm sorry for spoiling it for you. But she is there. She's there in well, she's there somehow, and they're all singing a song, and I just think, and for me, it's about, so my children are growing up, and there's parts of that I might miss, and I don't want to miss it, sort of thing. So it feels I get the serious feels about that.
Yeah.
Only from the chest up, as we discussed. I feel as if I'm sort
Yeah.
of.
No feeling
But
from the
it's an interesting point, and it's interesting about trying to keep it engaging, important, and serious, but also having a bit of fun with it, because we are dealing with the fundamental building blocks of our society, which is some of us identify as male, some of us identify as female, some of us identify somewhere in between that, and it moves around sort of thing. So if I think of that, some of those issues, some of it, I feel as if my response isn't a traditional masculine response, but it's still mine.
Yeah.
And I'm still a man.
Yeah.
I still identify as a man, but it's just the way I feel about it.
Yeah, it's that sliding scale of masculinity, isn't it? And
Yeah,
femininity. It's not you can just plot it on a box and go, well, that's where I am. It's a sliding scale, and that moves depending on what you're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Or you're watching,
Yeah, or what you're watching.
Yeah.
Marley and me for me, I think.
Okay. So you mentioned about the workshop sort of thing, and we are looking at developing that a little bit, aren't we? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a real aim, I think, over the next couple of years is to really push that out. And we're quite conscious, we're a Plymouth group. We have had interest from outside, but I think we'd really like conquer Plymouth. It sounds a real strong word.
Let's not use conquer.
No. But yeah, go on. Put the on. But certainly we want to cement our position in Plymouth, and I think we've tried that. And again, you talk about vulnerability. I think there's an element there of we're kind of on that precipice, and we have been for quite a while. And it's taken us time to get this because, like we said before, none of us are experts in this. And I think we're really, really conscious of the fact early on that if we stepped into this space too early, we'd almost get caught with our pants down. It would be literally like, oh, we ain't ready for this yet. And there will be some challenges coming back to us. There will be those discussions from a male point of view, saying, well, what about? And we're very open to those conversations, and we have been from the start. But we want to bring that in and go, yeah, let's listen to that, let's hear about that.
Absolutely.
So the workshops are really important, and I think really to push out into some more organisations, really try and get ourselves into maybe those more dominated industries and those more male-dominated organisations where we can have those conversations more. And then certainly for me, I'd like to sort of venture off to around the masculinity more, learn more about that, and bringing that into the conversation. But then the key part of this is also to have that female voice, because we're a bunch of men. Like we said, we've lived in our world of masculinity all our lives. We've opened the lid to that experience a little bit, but we need to keep having those voices telling us about what that feels like from a woman's point of view, because we aren't instantly alive to that. So as much as we're learning more, we need to constantly keep up to date and hearing what those voices are. And I think, looking back over since we started, the biggest point that I've experienced through this work so far was at the Armed Forces Day, when we did that the store at the Armed Forces Day.
Yeah.
And I think you were there.
Yeah, I was there.
I know
what you're going to say.
Yeah, and we had that conversation with, I think he was a landscaper, and he was there with his daughter. And he came over, and it was, to be fair to him, he stepped in, he took that step forward and said, so what's this all about? And we started talking about it, and instantly you could see that recoil. Not so sure what that's all about. And we just had a conversation, didn't we, around some of those daily challenges that we've talked about. And it wasn't until we then spoke to his daughter and said, how does that feel for you? Have you ever done this, that? I think we talked about the taxi example, which we used. Have you ever felt concerned about getting a taxi on your own after a night out? And her reaction to, all the time. My friends feel it. And the look on the dad's face, it was like, what the hell? I didn't know any of this. And then as his daughter then kind of voiced her experiences a bit more, you could see him just like, oh my God, I knew nothing about it. And that's what this is all about. Yeah. It's about just peeling back the blinds a little bit and just saying, just consider this from this point of view. And by having those conversations that we all had quite early on with, the women in our lives, friends, family, etc., and just go, oh my God, I didn't know that, is the starting point. I think that is the bit that just is the seed that starts to grow. And once you then start to venture into that and tell me a bit more about that, and then you start to, I think as a man, you then sit back and reflect and go, okay, not that I understand this, but I appreciate that there's something here that we need to maybe have a wider conversation about. And I just hope that guy went away and spoke to his friends about it, and maybe just started to.
It'd be nice to find out. If you were that landscaper, get back in touch.
Yeah.
It seems like a great segue into the questions, because there's a couple of times we've almost treaded on them accidentally or on purpose, sort of thing. So we have received a couple of questions and comments from you in the post. Thanks very much for taking the time to comment. And if you feel as if you do want to join those voices, please do so. Visit us at M.A.N.Culture.co.uk or email us at info@M.A.N.Culture.co.uk, or just put some comments or questions in the section below. The questions we received. Steve, you want to read them out, or do you want to sort of sign them?
One is, what makes you guys so special?
So the first question is, what makes us guys so special? This kind of links to it doesn't. We're not special at all, is it? So you said we're not academics. We're not
experts in the field.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I'm linked back to that day of the training course when they said go home and ask your partners, and then we come in the next day and we're like, right, okay. So this is not about how men should act.
No.
This is not trying to tell people what they should be doing. It's about understanding. I think it's understanding it's a thing, isn't it?
Yeah, so a little smile when that sort of comment comes in. 'Cause I think it has been something that's been not, has been raised a little bit. And like I say, the answer is we're not. None of us are. We were 12 blokes from all walks of life, from all different organisations and industries. And I think we made it very, very clear, didn't we, very early on, we're not here to sit in front of a bunch of men and boys with halos on our heads and say, this is how you should behave. That's not where we come out. And I think we've all reflected on our own personal experiences through life and gone, we ain't anything, we've all had stuff in our lives we go, could have handled that better. So my answer to that is we're not. We're just normal people from Plymouth who are just wanting to make a little bit of a difference if we can, even if we can make a small difference. If we can just make, if our work just helps people just to think about this differently, just to open, just to step outside that world of masculinity. My challenge would be just go and have a conversation with your female partner or your mum or your sister or a female colleague and say, look, what's this all about? What's it like for you? What's that feel like? And I say the examples we've always used is, getting in a taxi late at night, and we've heard stories of girls putting hair in the seats so that their DNA is in the taxi if anything should happen. I've never
taking a picture of the registration.
I've struggled with that
to friends
anyway, but I've never had to consider that. Things like carrying the keys in their hands if they're walking home just in case they get attacked. Thinking about which way you're going to go home. What time you're going to leave, and I think many women have shared those different experiences of that day to day. What do I wear? How does that present? What does that say about me? Is that attracting the wrong attention? Whereas for me, it's you put a pair of jeans and t-shirt on, or if you get dressed up for a night out, that doesn't really hit my psyche a little bit. So we're not special, but I think that's the important part of this work is. It's not to be sat there being talked to, and the idea of the workshop is not to be a lecture. It's about, have you thought about, has this ever happened? What's your considerations around this? And it is about starting conversations, and there will be a whole breadth of opinions in those conversations, which are all welcome, because we've all got different backgrounds.
So sorry to disappoint, but we're not special at all.
Next question, the same question, one from a man, one from a woman. How do I get involved?
How do I get involved with M.A.N.Culture? So there's a couple of things. So if you really, really feel strongly about getting involved, message us through the website. If you aren't sure what we're about, we hold a get to know us session it's the second Wednesday of every month. The next one is on the 13th of November. At the moment it's at Nuffield Health in the Barbican Leisure Centre, but we are looking at, where else could we move those things?
Different venues, yeah.
If it's meeting men and boys where they gather, where the men and boys gather, okay, so should we look at different spaces like that? And I think you raised the challenge quite rightly about, sometimes if you go to the gym, it's like you go in and you've squeezed it into your day as it is, sort of thing. So if you want to get involved, you can get involved that way, second Wednesday of every month. We also had the conversation about, as the question is, like, as a man, how do I get involved? And as a woman, how do I get involved? And we talked about is this an exclusively male organisation? And we had the conversation and it just didn't feel right, did it?
No.
I think from the inside looking out, it felt okay. But what does that look like from the outside looking in?
Yeah.
If you've got an organisation of men that are talking about these sort of things, what's going on in there?
Yeah.
And I think to make sure that transparency is there.
And I think it harks back to what we said earlier on. The female voice is really, really key to this.
Well, it links into what you just said, like the DNA drop-in. I remember when we did that workshop and a woman said, do you know that's what we do? And we were all like,
yeah, taken aback.
Come on, is this a joke?
Yeah.
So you take a picture of the registration of the cab and you send it to your friends so that if you don't make the journey, at least there's evidence that you got into the cab.
Yeah.
The only thing I ask is, can I eat my kebab or pizza when I'm in there? That's the only thing. So hearing that, we would never have heard that if the woman wasn't in the room.
And that's really key. I think it's a really key point. I mean, I think where you've got to then separate it is the work we do. I think it's really key that it's men having conversations with men. Not for any other reason than it's more not inclusive. It creates more of a safer space for men to be able to go, I don't agree with that, or I don't get this, or
to ask a question. Hang on a minute, this sounds weird to me. And if we get people that are very well informed on the subject, very passionate about the subject, quite rightly, that one question the man felt if he could answer, he could be sort of shouted down. And he's like, right, I'm never asking a question again.
And that's what we want to try and avoid. We want people to be inquisitive about it. We want people to feel confident about, doing what we've done, is taking this journey and going, look, I don't understand this. Who do I speak to? Who do I get these answers from? How do I, because it's not something you sit down in a pub with your mates and go, so have you ever thought about X, Y, and Z and having a really good conversation about it? So where does those conversations happen? How do those conversations happen? And we hark back to men carving out some of their time to make it important about having their time with friends or whoever. We don't, I certainly haven't done, and we tend to struggle with that. But so I think there's a separation there of having men having conversations with men, so that you can have that space where it's like, I can say what I'm thinking without necessarily being judged or shot down. But it's also really interesting that women have been a key part of the creation of this group and have very much championed this group, from its early stages. And that female voice is also really key as we move forward, because it keeps us in check. I think it's because you hear those experiences, you hear the voices, keeps you up to date with what is the feeling currently. But it also is a way that we can also sound off to our female colleagues and say, how does that feel? How does that come across? So it is it's about a partnership. It's about bringing the two sides together and working together with it and saying, okay, well, you can kind of give us the information and the experiences, and we can go off and start having those chats. So absolutely. We want men involved, massively want men involved. Step out from the shadows. Let's come and have a chat with us, see if it's something that you agree with. And absolutely women getting involved as well, because we need those voices to sort of push us in the right directions as well as in what we're trying to do.
And the way to do that initially is to come to one of the Get to Know Us events and comment in the DMs or through the website.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Any other questions, Steve?
You've touched on this already, so it's up to you on this one. If I come to a M.A.N.Culture workshop, how safe a space is it for me to ask the questions I have?
Yeah. This is what it's all about. It's about creating that safe space. And it's, I think sometimes we have to maybe admit that we've sort of not dealt with it as well as we sort of could have done. There's one incident does spring to mind, and it's about making sure. So we talk at the workshop. We talk about how we will sort of hold the space for people. So we talk about, you know, if we're going to disagree, we disagree respectfully. We hear people out, so people are allowed to say what they want. But it is a challenge, isn't it? It's a significant challenge that we do have to manage. And I think it sort of links a little bit to what you were saying about so the things that you're interested in individually and the things that the organisation is approaching and tackling and looking at. And sometimes they move, and it's about how we move with them. The one that springs to mind immediately is the what about this, what about that? It's not about trivialising men's experience of the world.
No.
It's definitely about listening to that. And we talked yesterday. There's a category in. There's a category, there's a numerical category for injuries in the world. It's like a database, and there is a category for an injury experienced through setting fire to your water skis, but there is not a category for an injury of a man experiencing postnatal depression. And that's valid. That is weird. But this is why we got into that conversation, because we thought, yeah, this is weird, sort of thing. It's weird how our experience of the world is very different from other people's experience of the world.
And there's no clear line, is there? There's no clear line between the experiences of men and experiences of women. It's a real kind of shaded area that happens there. And I say, for us, we've always set out on this goal, haven't we, to say, come to a conference. We want you to voice your opinions. We want to challenge the narrative, but we want to do it in a constructive way and a fun way in some respects.
You talked about that as well a bit. You've talked about fun a lot, and you've also talked about edgy. It's about approaching it and being okay to be wrong. Really stands out.
Yeah, and we've said that from the start, haven't we? As a group, we don't have all the answers, and that's the thing. I think we've got to be really confident about the fact that we will go into a conversation in a workshop or whatever. We may present an argument, we may present a viewpoint, but that's not the written rule. That's not this is what it is, full stop, no discussion.
Okay.
We don't have all the answers, and I think that's where the key part around the workshops comes into it, is the fact that we're not sitting as experts, pointing our finger saying, this is the right thing to do, blah, blah, blah. It's about having a conversation, and it's about having those viewpoints and seeing, so you've got that point of view, you've got that point of view. They probably all come from the same kind of origins, but then where is that in the middle? So what does that actually mean? And what does that mean, and what does that mean for the future, taking it forward?
Okay, yeah. So that answers the question. Yeah, you happy with that? Okay, awesome, thanks.
Last question then. As a man, I feel when we talk about how we grow up and learn behaviours, I feel as though my parents are being blamed, and that doesn't sit well with me. What are your thoughts on that? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Definitely.
Shortly is no. I think we've touched on it a little bit, talking about the world of masculinity that we've grown up in, and that's not. We've all had various experiences growing up, and I think that has an impact on our lives. But this is more of a societal discussion, I think. It's about the way that I was born a male. I've grown up as a male. My life experiences are from a male perspective in a male environment. And this isn't about upbringing, it's about the pressures that we're feeling from society to act in a certain way. So I think some of the discussions we talk about challenging. So we talk about active bystandership, which obviously me and you have done. And the difficulties sometimes of stepping into that area of challenge. So one of the things we talk about is, would you challenge your mates? Well, you kind of get locked into this world sometimes through the expectations of your peer group or society to say, but you should act in a certain way. So when you step out of that, suddenly you kind of almost popping your head above the parapet, aren't you, to say, take a shot at me. That takes some bravery. That takes some courage to step out and go, actually, do you know what, I don't agree with it. And that's, comes back to the conversations we trying to have is, would you challenge that? If not, why not? And by not challenging it, are you therefore kind of almost condoning the behaviour that's happened? So, no, it's not about upbringing. It's not about you as an individual. I think it's about us as a group. And I think that's the really interesting point, because if you took it as an individual point of view, you have experiences and viewpoints scattered across a whole spectrum of backgrounds, upbringings, whether that's sex or race or even countries of origin and cultural impact on that. It's about a group. It's about us as a group. So how do we as a group take this challenge forward?
We are social creatures,
rather than just a one person.
Yeah, and I think as well that the last point is that time moves, the society moves on, and it's about how, so I remember some of the things that happened to me, and I don't even want to say to me, for me, growing up. We live in a different space now, so it's certainly not about that. And also, I think, do you know what? My parents were doing the best they could with the context, with the tools that were given. We've got very different tools these days. We can see the information that's at our fingertips. In this modern society is very different from what it was sort of then. So I certainly don't feel as if. And also, if you feel that way, come along, let's talk about it. Because that's a way to have a conversation about these things, and that's the important thing. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. And finally, what does M.A.N.Culture mean to you? Firstly to you, Scott, and then you, Andy.
What does M.A.N.Culture mean to me? Oh God, so many things. I sort of link back to that first day that we sort of started having conversations with this, and certainly the second day. But what it means to me now is, as I said, it's grown. It's not grown arms and legs. I think we've grown arms and legs a little bit in it. Some of the conversations that we have personally. I've never spoken to a grown-up in my life before, and it's only through that sort of getting to know people and getting to safe space.
It's feeling safe, isn't it, to be able to have those chats?
So the stuff that I've done, and so some of the stuff that I've talked about through the conference and through events that we've done, those were the first places that I said them out loud, sort of thing. And so it's really helped me get a voice. It's really helped me grow in confidence, because I remember someone said, well, just speak from the heart. And I'm like, well, what's one of them? But just being able to sort of talk about what's important to you, and also find something that's important to me enough.
I know you link back a lot to your daughters, don't you?
Yeah,
you talk about what's the future for my daughters.
What's the world going to look like for them, sort of thing. And part of me feels terrible that I'm involved, because it's been brought to my attention that their experience of the world is very different from mine. But I suppose it doesn't matter how you got in. But what does it mean to me? Oh, so much. Yeah, I've struggled, but it's a safe space that I can actually be myself in. If you want a sound bite about it, which is probably the first time I've explored that. So over to you. What does it mean to you?
I think for me, I hark back to the beginnings. I think I hark back to the reasons why we were having those conversations in the domestic abuse, sexual violence arenas. What happened in Plymouth, and what I've seen through my work, and to sit there and hear those experiences and not do anything about it. I think is the driving force for me, and I think for me that is the link back. That's the core value for me, is sitting back and saying, if we don't, who is? because
Yeah,
I don't think there's this work's being done particularly on the grand scale, which is why we kind of start off keeping it small in Plymouth. But if we could have an impact, if we could just bring on, a small percentage of people to say, listen to all the arguments, listen to all the viewpoints and go, but if we just made that tweak to some of our behaviours, then we would make the world a better place for our daughters, for our partners, for our female friends, for ourselves as well,
Absolutely.
and our own friends.
That links back to what I
think
said.
that for me is reaching back to the core reason why this started was because it was like, we can't just sit in the shadows anymore. We can't, women's rights movements have been happening for so many years and there's been improvements, but there's still such a way to go. But when we talk about, and I think we always hark back to it in M.A.N.Culture, don't we? This isn't necessarily about, the rates of femicide or rape offences, sexual. This is also about some of those small behaviours where you've got a larger percentage of victims with probably a larger percentage of perpetrators or offenders in this, where it's that low level, everyday grind, that constant rub around sort of sexual harassment, comments, catcalling. I mean, we had the story of a 13-year-old girl who was being catcalled on the way to school. It's those sorts of things that don't make the headlines. They don't set lights and flashing, but that's the daily grind. And it's, you got to then look at it and go, so A, what are those people achieving by doing those behaviours? What impact is that having on a lot of people? And why is there so many women who just feel like they can't get a taxi home at night? Why is there so many women and girls in the city who just can't even walk to netball practice without getting some comments or getting some kind of lewd behaviours that achieve nothing? So if we could just twist and adjust those behaviours, is that not worth having a go at?
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing for me is that importance of bringing men and boys into this conversation. Be part of this. Be part of this cultural shift, which is basically what it is. And hopefully see some outcomes from it.
Okay, thanks so much. Okay, so just going to go straight into the outro. Hope you enjoyed this incredibly non-time bound. I feel as if we really blew the sort of time factors, but that's the thing about conversations, we don't know how long they'll take. Thanks very much for listening. Just as an update, you will hopefully see the conference footage up on the YouTube channel soon. So if you didn't manage to get to the conference, you'll be able to see some of the speakers there. How to contact us. So as I said, you can message us in the comments below. You can also contact us via the website or info@M.A.N.Culture.co.uk. And you can also see us every second Wednesday of every month at the moment, Nuffield Health Centre, but venue to be decided, and we'll obviously share that on social media. Andy?
I was going to say social medias, so Twitter, Instagram.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Look at subscribing us, message us on there as well.
Yeah. If you like the message, give us a comment, give us a like, give us a thumbs up. Finally, Andy, thanks very much for, I'm going to say standing in for Cadis because no one can replace Cadis.
Can't replace Cadis.
Thanks very much for coming along and being part of this today.
Thank you. Cheers, Scott.
Look at the camera, Scott. We say welcome back because most people just press pause, go for piss, won't they? You're going to keep that in there, aren't you?